does seem as though we are well on the way to bringing about a final end to the menace of a nuclear-armed Iran. When the interests align, these two individuals, Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, are able to work in lockstep, one with the other. It's a wonderful day for free countries. It's a wonderful day for freedom. They regularly set about saying, death to America, death to Israel. So when an enemy has two countries in its crosshairs, it shouldn't be surprised when those two countries come about in order to turn their sights on it. That's precisely what's happened here. President Donald Trump decided that it was time for the Americans to use the unique American military capabilities that he has at his disposal and help that winning horse to cross the line towards victory. And I believe we're well on the way to that victory. The intervention of the United States Armed Forces under the Commander-in-Chief of the United States, President Donald Trump, is really impossible to exaggerate or to overstate. It essentially means that after Israel made great progress in targeting Iran's nuclear weapons facilities and wonderful, wonderful military progress in targeting Iran's ballistic missile capabilities and their launching capabilities, even more importantly, that the final yard in this race against Iran arming up with the world's most dangerous weapons, that final yard was carried out by the Americans. Now, this is something that is yet to be absolutely assessed in terms of how final the damage is, how destructive that damage has been, whether or not Iran's nuclear weapons facilities in the three sites that were hit by the Americans, namely Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, whether those sites have been absolutely obliterated. All of that will come to light based on steady inspections of those sites undertaken by relevant individuals and relevant organizations. But for now, it does seem as though we are well on the way to bringing about a final end to the menace of a nuclear-armed Iran. And it's worth mentioning just how long-standing this threat has been in the ether for us here in Israel. For more than 40 years, Prime Minister Netanyahu has warned about the coming threat from Iran based on its pursuit of nuclear weapons capabilities. And it's in the shadow of that ongoing threat that Israelis have been called to war after war after war at a cadence of about every 2 to 3 years against Iran's proxies that Iran mounted right on our borders, such as Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad inside the Gaza Strip, and Hezbollah inside southern Lebanon, all of which acted as really deterrents against Israel doing what it felt it needed to do in order to stymie Iran's nuclear weapons capabilities. And every 2 to 3 years, these proxies would flare up. Every 2 to 3 years, they would launch massive attacks against innocent Israelis. Both of those proxies have been taken apart by the IDF, and now it seems that their patron has been pushed back well away from its highest ambition, namely gaining the ability to strike at the heart of Israel with a view to doing what the Iranian mullahs said they wanted to do, specifically to bring about an end to the Zionist entity. They're now further away from that than they've ever been, and I highly doubt that they will recover from these recent blows. The relationship between President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, when it comes to taking decisive action against common enemies, is deeper than anybody really understood or fully anticipated. There's been a lot of talk about some degree of enmity, dislike, distrust between the two. It goes back a number of years, incidentally. For example, some viewers may recall that President Trump was very angry with Prime Minister Netanyahu after Joe Biden won the election to become president of the United States in 2020. Famously, he actually used an expletive about Prime Minister Netanyahu in an interview that he gave to an Israeli journalist. But it seems that when the interests align, and they absolutely do align around the toppling of Iran's nuclear weapons program, that these two individuals, Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump, are able to work in lockstep, one with the other. It's a wonderful day for free countries. It's a wonderful day for freedom. It's a wonderful day for democracies. And it really is something that everybody should rally around, this great alliance between two determined democracies to ensure the continued freedom of their countries, of all that their people stand for. And incidentally, if anybody wonders why the interests are so very aligned, it's because the mothers of Iran expressed as much. They regularly set about saying, death to America, death to Israel. So when an enemy has two countries in its crosshairs, it shouldn't be surprised when those two countries come about in order to turn their sights on it. That's precisely what's happened here. I think that this military action undertaken by the United States of America really shows that when Israel is taking the fight to its enemies, it is far more likely to enjoy the support of its great ally, the United States of America, than when it sits, as it has done in years gone by, and allows threats to mass on its border. You know, there is no success like success itself, as the phrase goes, as the adage goes. Prior to October the 7th, Israel had allowed itself to enter into a mindset of managing threats on its borders. It managed the growing threat of Hezbollah. It managed the growing threat of Hamas. It managed the growing threat of Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And then, in the case of Hamas on October the 7th, that threat turned into a nightmare, an absolutely horrific reality for the people of Israel in ways that the viewers well understand. From that point onwards, Israel has adjusted, and Israel has said and made the decision that any time a threat emerges, that threat will be eliminated, for we dare not allow those threats to grow, to strengthen, to metastasize, and then ultimately to strike at our hearts. So I think that when you see that when Israel takes the fight to its enemies, as we've done inside Gaza, as we've done inside southern Lebanon, as we are in the midst of doing inside Iran, then our allies, the one and only true superpower in the world, the United States of America, feel that they can back a winning horse. And that's precisely what took place. President Donald Trump decided that it was time for the Americans to use the unique American military capabilities that he has at his disposal and help that winning horse to cross the line towards victory. And I believe we're well on the way to that victory. I think it's important that people recognize that while it's possible to look at each of the major fronts in which Israel has recently been engaged as three separate conflicts, in actual fact, they're all part of one war. We have the Gazan front, in which we're still deeply engaged. We have the Lebanon front, in which we are deeply engaged. And now intense attention is focused on the Iranian front. Finally, Israel has mobilized in order to really cut off the head of the snake. And I'm very, very pleased that we're doing so. But given that it's one long war, we cannot discount the war aims that have been set out by the Prime Minister. So with regard to Iran, the war aims are threefold. Number one, massively diminish their nuclear weapons program. Number two, massively diminish their ballistic missiles manufacturing program. And number three, break, breach, and smash the axis of evil that Iran had constructed, essentially to act almost as a noose of death, ever tightening around the neck of the one and only Jewish state. So those are the goals in Iran. We're well on the way to achieving all three of those. Then you have the situation inside the Gaza Strip. Now, the goals there were twofold initially. The first was to ensure that Hamas was completely and utterly removed as a fighting terror army from inside the Gaza Strip. We are on our way to doing that, but that mission is not yet absolutely complete. Hamas has been decimated and then some, but it's still able to operate as a guerrilla fighting force, far from the terror army it once was, but it does still have some operational capabilities. We're therefore continuing to battle against those. In addition to that, the goal was to return all of the hostages, those who were seized on October the 7th, those who are alive, and those who are no longer alive. And even today, the IDF, in an operation that it undertook together with the Shin Bet, brought back the bodies of 3 hostages. Those hostages were Shai Levinson, Ofra Kedar, and Yonatan Samareno. All 3 of those have now been brought back to the State of Israel for burial. And to me, it shows that no matter the successes in Iran, no matter the successes inside southern Lebanon, the war aims will not be completed of this one long war until we have all of our hostages home. And I believe that the return of these 3 bodies shows that no matter what goes on in other areas of this wartime arena, the Prime Minister and the government of the State of Israel, together with the Israeli defense establishment, is sedulously focused on recovering each and every one of our hostages. It's my sincere hope that they will all be brought home swiftly, and as many of those who are alive will be brought home alive, and therefore the clock continues to tick. A lot of people have asked whether this action in Iran brings us closer to or further away from peace in the region. I'm very much a realist when it comes to notions of war and peace. I'm hard-pressed to think about any nation that knows true peace. For example, the United States of America, that is the world's superpower. Can it be described as a nation at peace? Probably not. Probably, particularly in this moment, it's inaccurate to describe it as a nation at peace. But I think that the United States of America is a nation within its borders that largely knows quiet. Quiet is actually the standard to which nations should aspire. I believe that the actions against Iran perhaps don't bring us to the ethereal, any closer to the ethereal idea of peace throughout the region, but I do think those actions bring us far, far closer to the true standard we should be pursuing, namely the standard of quiet. Israelis would rest at quiet. Of course, we'll forever pray for peace, we'll forever yearn for peace, but in the absence of true peace, quiet absolutely will do for us here. We've gone through a very difficult period since October the 7th. That period is not yet over. And I think that if we can bring quiet to our borders, that will suffice. But on the notion of peace, it's worth mentioning that when thanking President Trump this morning, Prime Minister Netanyahu said in English that first comes strength, peace may yet follow. That is a derivative of the Hebrew prayer which says, Hashem oz la'amo yiten, Hashem yevarech et amo v'shalom. God will give his people strength. God will bless his people with peace. It's very important to analyze the construction of that prayer. It's very clear. The prayer suggests that first we must be strong, and only after being strong may we yet one day know peace. But as I say, peace is ethereal. Quiet is a realistic aim. I suggest that we focus on that.